Hey everyone, special guest Egman here with another event breakdown video for the No Heroes team. There was a large regional that they ran this past weekend in the European region. It was online, it was OPO4, and I'm really excited to jump in and talk about this event in general. And real quick, if you guys don't know who I am, I'm the Eggman. I run a YouTube channel that goes over One Piece and other card game results here. So if you guys want to check out my other breakdowns, make sure to check out my channel, as well as I run this website that you guys are seeing right here, Eggman Events, which also goes over a lot of One Piece and other card game tournament results and everything else. So link's going to be in the description for both of those. And if you guys want to see, again, these results or others for the One Piece card game, highly recommend you checking it out. But going on into this event in particular, again, it was ran by No Heroes. It had 983 players, 10 rounds of Swiss into our top 32 that we see here. They also streamed it on their Twitch, which is linked in this page as well. And they will be re-uploading their matches on this YouTube channel as well. So make sure to hit that subscribe button if you guys want to see those pop up in your feed. But going into this top 32 breakdown, we did have 10 Edward Newgates, 7 Laws, 4 Zoros, one of them winning the event, 4 Katakuris, 2 of the new Don Quixote do Flamingos, 1 of the starter deck, 8 Monkey D. Luffy, 1 Rebecca, 1 Queen, and 1 Rob Lucci to round it out. So kind of what we've been seeing. We've been seeing, again, like Red still doing very well going into the OPO4 meta. It is still within the first month of this meta too, so there are some adjustments. But honestly, if I was to say what are the best 4 decks in the game, I think Newgate, Law, Zoro, and Katakuri are easy choices for those. And then there's a bunch of kind of, as we see, singletons and 2 of the Dofis. So I think of the new meta, the Don Quixote do Flamingo, the Rebecca, and the Queen Leader are the 3 that are the most common of them, with the Vivi, the Crocodile, and the Isho being a little bit less tuned as well. But we're going to go over the top placing list for each one of these leaders, starting off with our first place list. So we have Nikki with their first place Zoro, and something that I noticed for this deck and a lot of other Zoros for this event compared to some of the other results that I've been going through is that most of the decks, or a lot of the Zoros, are playing blockers, which I think is really interesting. In particular, in this build, we do have 2 copies of the Tony Chopper. Other builds did run the Fossa blocker, which you do see pretty common in Edward Newgate as well, mostly because it is a searchable from Ezo, and it does have a 1k counter, so it's not as stuck in hand as Chopper. But Chopper is pretty searchable off the Curly Dadan as well, and if you are running a Nami build, it is searchable from there. So I don't dislike it. I do think there are some times where you do, a blocker means a lot in some of Zora's matchups, but you're also usually the one who's the aggressor for it too. So it's kind of like up in the air how useful they are sometimes, but I don't think I think like it can be in an impactful spot, especially for trying to be a little bit more value based, which with the ads of like the Vista as well as the 4-drop Brook and the Marshall D Teach, I think that makes a little bit of sense there too. So again, like the searchability of this card, it can technically be boosted by Machino. I'm curious if that happened at all during the weekend too. That's kind of from there. Otherwise, we are kind of just the standard event build of Zoro, where we're running 12 of these events with the Table Manners Kick Course, a Rad Beam, 3 guard points, 1 Jambe, 1 Red Hawk, 2 Fiery Doll, 2 Fire Fist, and a Jet Pistol as well. So I think Fire Fist is still pretty strong, especially since we do have the Gordon, which is used to get the get things in range of Fire Fist, which is really nice. Which is also kind of why I think Brook is important, even though we're only running 1. I've been seeing this pop up occasionally, and specifically in the red star deck, Luffy decks too. But Zoro also gets the advantage there, and just kind of everything else that we see from this one. So nothing too changing from the list I've seen again, except for the blocker. I think that's been something majorly different compared to most other Zoro builds. But congratulations to Nikki in general for their undefeated 10-0 run with this list here. Then next up, we do have Giovanni with their second place Newgate. So here is the list for this one. This is more of the Strawbeard version of it. And if you guys are new to Newgate, there's pretty much 3 builds that people are running, and kind of like 2.5. It's like the Strawbeard version. There is the Whitebeard version. So it's usually kind of denoted in my mind by having the Ezo and having more of the Whitebeard Pirates cards associated with them, as well as kind of the hybrid where you're running a little bit of both. There's a lot more cards that are searchable, but it's a little bit inconsistent on your searches, and that's kind of like it has like a higher ceiling because you're running more cards that you can get some results from. But I do like the idea of the Strawbeard version, especially since there are a lot of good events that you can run that Nami can search, including the Rad Beam, including the Guard Point, and the Gum Gum Red Hawk, which this is a very strong card for matchups like Trafalgar Trafalgar Law, where they tend to play their blockers early. You can use this Gum Gum Red Hawk to get rid of them, which generally the best counterplay to Newgate at times is just to use blocker to kind of stall them out a little bit and try to get, you know, cards out of their hand as when they're at 0 life, which is really good. And then other than that, just kind of the general package we see a lot of the time. We're playing 4 Otaman, 4 Machinos, which generally is more on the, I'd say, Whitebeard side, because Nami does have a lot of searchable 2Ks, including like the Sanji. The Brook is sometimes seen, and like the promo Luffy as well. But I do think, like, obviously Otama and Machina are still very, very good 2Ks in hand and on board as well. So Bart is also added just because we're not playing Fasa, or we're not playing Izo, so Fasa doesn't really matter. And there's kind of the top end of 4 Marcos, 4 Luffys, 2 Ace, 4 Thatch, and an Edward Newgate. So that's the list there. Congratulations to Giovanni for their finish there. Next up, we do have David with their third place Star Deck 8 Monkey D. Luffy. Monkey D. Luffy, if you guys remember our previous breakdown, did get second in the last OPO3 tournament that No Heroes ran. This is a different build with a different pilot, but I do think it's interesting to note that this Luffy has a history of doing well at these No Heroes tournaments. So we do have some new cards from this deck, specifically with the release of OPO4. The big cards are specifically the Bartholomew 2K counter, so it is Dressrosa, which means it's not searchable in this deck in general, but the fact that it is a 2K, and also, even though it is costly at 3, is a blocker if you need it, which is really nice. So again, sometimes against Newgate, if they don't have the setup or you need to buy like another turn, being able to just play this Bart and have them have to, you know, answer it is really, really strong in that way. We also kind of have in the same way the Sabo, so being able to use the on-play to cycle cards I think is really big. And then also just having a blocker that can't be KO'd, or any of your other cards can't be KO'd by effects to the start of your next turn, is a very strong effect too. So a little bit like, you know, one turn version of Borsellino is still a really good effect for a blocker, and with it being able to get the draw 2, trash 2 when we're playing such a good top end of Sakazuki, Shanks, and the 10-drop Kuzan, we don't, like, we're going to have times when there's cards in our hand that aren't really useful. So being able to use cards like Sabo to fix our hands like that, I think is very strong as well. Other than that, we do have the Sengoku, which is a little bit of a rarer pick for decks like this, but being able to give something -4 cost when attacking is strong. It's a little bit slow, but it is a 5/6 as well. And sometimes there are times when we just don't have really good odd numbered curve cards, so I think Sengoku and the Sabo can really help that and make us have some impactful cards for turn 5, which is nice. So other than that, I think that kind of goes over the deck, and congratulations to David for their 3rd place finish with this list. And then next up we have Trafalgar Law. So this is Brian's list for this one. Got 4th place with it, and there are a couple of unique choices. I do have a personal opinion that Law has been looking very similar for the last 6 months, and it's been kind of hard to talk about some of the new techs when there aren't really that present right now. And specifically, you'll notice that there aren't any new cards of OPO4 in this build either. There are like some kind of rare choices that you can tech into it, but particularly for this one, we do have 4 different event cards. We have 1 Rad Beam and 1 Guard Point, which I think are pretty standard, not too surprising, but we also do have 1 copy of the Gum Gum Red Hawk, which I would not immediately expect to play around this or see this from my opponent, but it does have like a really good trigger, as well as the counter is very good too, and kind of similar with the Punk Gibson as well. So I would probably not be playing around this against most Trafalgar Laws unless I knew that they had it, and because of that, and because you're having something that is something that's just unexpected, I think that can get you a lot of advantage and maybe sneak in a win or 2 because of it too. And then lastly, we have Basil Hawkins, which is somewhat common, but not all the time. I think this is definitely a tech for the deck. It doesn't have a counter cost, but it does have a Supernova tag and is a 5-drop. So it's easy to go into this with our leader effect. And I've always kind of said this is one of the worst cards in your hand, but one of the best cards on your board. It will make your opponent not want to block with anything. It's very good for trying to pressure down some of your opponent's larger cards. And it's very obnoxious in general if you're able to set it up. So I don't really have much more to say about this list, because I'd say like generally the other 45 cards were what we normally see for the deck, but I do want to say a big congrats to Brian for their 4th place finish. Next up, jumping up to 8th place, we have Mursad with their Charlotte Katakuri. And Katakuri did moderately well for this event, and I don't have the exact numbers for leaders in general for this build for this deck and or for this event in general, but yellow I think is usually really well represented, or at least Katakuri is very well represented. Mostly, in my opinion, off the back of the Charlotte Linlin, it's the reason you play Charlotte Katakuri, and it's the reason that you play yellow, because this is such a good card for turning the tempo, turning a game from your opponents to yours, getting a life, making them trash your life. It's like the same as like draw one, trash one, right? As in you draw one and your opponent trashes one card from their hand because of how the life mechanic works. So because you have such a good boss monster, and there's so many ways to kind of address a lot of decks, and this really puts a lot of other decks on a clock, especially because if you play two of this back to back, you're in a really, really good position. But because of that, I think a lot of the deck is kind of built around having that tempo and being able to use the entirety of our turn 10 to play a Linlin and get that advantage and that pressure there. So the bottom end is pretty standard. We did get a couple of OPO4 2Ks, including the Amande, which I really do like this card. It's really great for interacting with decks like Trafalgar Law and getting rid of one drop or two drop blockers that your opponent's probably going to try to put down to get the defend against the Charlotte Linlin that's already on the board, which is nice. We also have the Sanji, which I think goes without saying is one of the best cards that yellow got just in the game right now. Being able to be a blocker you get from your life is fantastic. The fact that it's a 5K means it can pressure cards for free. Very, very strong card in a lot of ways. And then the beige, which is your best friend. And if you ever see it in your life for Charlotte Katakuri, you slot it down in the bottom, and then you remember that to kind of get some, the life trigger that you need to kind of swing the game to your side as well. So, and then some kind of unusual picks. We have the arrow, which most decks that I've seen kind of phase it out. Leaving one Dawn open for this is kind of tricky for Katakuri at times, especially if we do have if we drop a 10 drop, this card's very difficult to, have the time to play it. So we don't kind of run this all the time, but it is unique. And also the Yamato, which I've been kind of warming up. Like there are some times this is a really good card for some matchups. It does help you. Like there are times when if you don't want to leave the 10 Dawn open for Linlin, you can play Yamato. You have one Dawn open for either your leader effect or I guess the arrow that we just talked about. So the fact that it can heal with a condition is still kind of good for us. And I do normally like the 8-drop Katakuri more, but I think one or two copies of this, if you don't like that or want some more variety, I think is very strong too. So 7-drop Linlin, this is also I think very strong. I think it's very good on turn 7, and then when you have 7 Dawn, it gets slightly worse as the game ends, but it's still a notable card as well. So that is the list here for Mersat, and congratulations for their top there. Next up we have Rebecca. So this is Carlo's build of it here, and it's pretty unique in the fact that we do run only 3 of the Luffy, and which most people I think kind of cap out at the 4 that you can run for it. But I'd say that this is more of a control build. You try to be really defensive, really get the destruction and removal from your opponent's cards, and then you get the win off that. So I do think that Luffy, it is strange putting this to 3 copies because it is, again, your most important card. And if you're playing against a deck that can remove this, or if you're playing against yellow and the 8-drop Katakuri this into your life, you're in a bad spot a lot of the time. So, but I do think being able to then run 2 Cavendish, which is kind of like a mini version of the Luffy, at least at being able to remove cards, is very good. Being able to get a double removal, I think, is a strong spot as well. We're playing the Truno. We're playing cards like the 3000 Worlds, which is great for removal. We have the Orlumbus to get things into range for our removal too, and kind of the rest of it. So most of the Dressrosa stuff is pretty common because we do have to run a lot of the Dressrosa cards just so our leader doesn't miss off their top 2 effect, but I do like the ads for the removal and kind of the slower pace to make sure that we can get to, if we are able to get our opponent out of their resources, we can really punish them with a Luffy if we get it established. So not much more to say about that one, but congratulations to Carlo for their finish there. And then next up we have our Queen player. So this is David with Queen. And here in North America, we have seen Queen win a regionals last weekend. And so I've been seeing a little bit more people on it. I don't know if that affected the European scene as much, but I do think it's something that made people kind of respect the deck and realize that it is is capable of doing well, because before that, I wasn't sure. I don't think as many people are sold on the fact of it. So looking at the top end, which is kind of the important part, we have 2 Solar Kings just for the tempo, because obviously it's not enough to be an 8-drop for Queen, 3 Katakuri, as well as 3 copies of Mihawk, 4 of Yamato, which I do agree Yamato is like the best card, like top end for this deck, because it can sometimes get you the setup for like a draw, recover 2, but also being able to get the removal, because early game we're not really pressuring our opponent's life as much, which means if they have 5 life and we have 1, we're able to heal up to 7, as well as get rid of their 6-drop of theirs. And I think that's a really powerful effect in a lot of ways, which you can get even more powerful if Katakuri puts more card in their life, or the Pound as well. And then 1 copy of the Kaido, and I do like the kind of the idea around Kaido. It is a little bit rough because we don't, we're not able to use Kaido and use our leader effect in the same turn, but being able to get cards back into our hand, which can include like a 3-drop of our own if we want to get back like a Perona or something like that, or even like a Don Quixote Doflamingo to get our life set up again. But being able to get the removal of an 8-drop is very strong. I do like the 3 copies of Gum Gum Rain, because we do run a good amount of this top end that can be stuck in our hand if we want to get to a low hand size. 3 of the 3000 Worlds and 4 of the Gum Gum Red Rock, because it is such good removal for us. And if we already have one of our 8 or 9 drops kind of established, it's really strong to just do a play such as use the Red Rock, attack with our Queen to heal 1, and then play one of our 3-drop blockers that we run, such as the Don Quixote, the Pound, the Brule, or the Boa Hancock, and that's 10 Don. So that's kind of how that works out. So I do like the idea of the deck. I think it has some good matchups. Sometimes a counter yellow matchup, and like Lin invalidates it, and sometimes aggro is a little bit too aggressive for it, but otherwise it does have the potential to never lose, which is very strong. So this is David's list. Congratulations for their top there. And then next up we have this Rob Lucci list, which I really like this one. This one's really unique, and I'm really excited to go over it. So this is Murat's 20th place list for this one, and this is Rob Lucci, which I did play a lot of in OPO3. But this is kind of like a combination of the CP9 as well as the Dressrosa archetype with how it works. So kind of using the CP9 as an engine to just kind of gain value, and more importantly, get cards into our trash with cards like Air Door specifically to look at top 5. We do get a 5 cost out of our trash from the cards we saw. So 4 Jabra, 4 Kaku. We also play the Khalifa, the Fukuro, as well as the Spandam. So not a super lot of targets, so we can be kind of risky of whiffing it, in my opinion, but otherwise very strong there. We do run the Sabo in this build as well, and then also the Bart, but instead of it replacing the Fukuro, it's replacing the Borsalino. That I think is fine, since you do want as many of the CP9s. And then we are playing the Monkey D. Luffy for our win condition. So none of the Dressrosa, or like very few of the Dressrosa stuff, is actually limited to the actual archetype, or like to the leader. So you can play this card. It can still activate, attack active characters, or get the restand if you need it to, which also includes having the King Kong gun. This card also is not restricted to Luffy, though I think some people do get a little bit blinded by it, but it's any Dressrosa card. So that can include the Luffy, that can include the Sabo, or even the Rebecca that you played early. So this being able to look top 3 and also fill our trash for a Dressrosa card, I think is fine for us. It helps us out, yes, including the barrier that we run, which is a 2K or 4K if we have 15 cards in our trash, which is maybe a little bit trickier for us as Rob Lucci compared to Rebecca, but definitely not impossible either. So, and then lastly, to wrap it up, we do have the Isho, which is helpful to help get rid of the card advantage that our opponent might be accumulating, especially if we're being like a little bit more defensive. Being able to slam this down and get things in range for our Kaku by using the Don -1 or Don ×1 effect, I think is strong in its own way too. So that is the build here. It's really cool. I want to test it out. I probably will later this week. And congratulations to Murat for their 20th place finish there. And to wrap it up, we do have our Don Quixote Doflamingo from OPO4. So this is Daniel's 22nd place list here. It's pretty common that the Don Quixote Doflamingo leader is very good for the film archetype, since film just happens to have green and purple cards to kind of fill it out, and a really good draw engine with cards like the Nami to be able to look at the top 3 cards of our deck to find a film card, and then also the Luffy being able to play, swarm the board, being just a really good 7-drop, which is not only a blocker, but also lets you play another card from your hand that has the film type, as long as it has a cost of 4 or less. So again, the Nami could be the Uta or the Bins as well. So I think that's very strong. We do run a couple of the Don Quixote do Flamingo cards, including 4 of the Sugar and 4 of the 10-drop. This does kind of warp the game around, do they have a second one after you play it? It stuns down your opponent, and some decks like really need to attack with their leader. So to prevent your opponent from doing that is a strong effect too. So we're not playing any copies of the Guild in this list, which is usually common for this deck to get its draw. But I do also agree that it is a little bit tricky to get it set up and get the attack continuing. So I think instead they decided to go with 4 copies of the Queen, which I do like. It's 1 less draw, but it is also a blocker. It's a 1K. And the fact that you are able to, use the effect immediately, even if they do remove it, is very strong, I think, as well. So I do kind of lean more towards running this card for the cycle ability, making sure that we find the Don Quixote do Flamingo a little bit more. And the only other thing is that I do like running, if I am playing so many copies of Queen, I do like running a lot of copies of Thunderbogwa, which does get us the Dawn back that we used for this effect. Especially since, the leader effect of Don Quixote do Flamingo is to get that 2 Dawn back up at the end of your turn. So being able to Thunderbogwa after playing Queen and be back on our even curve if we want to play the 10-drop on time, I think is very strong. So other than that, just kind of the events that we see. Union Armado is fairly strong. It only defends your film characters, but that is good, especially if you want to play a game defending the Nami. Being able to use this card to find Union Armado, and then using the card to protect your Nami from taking a more, or protect it from being KO'd for the rest of the turn, I think is good in its own right. So that's kind of the list for you guys here. I hope you guys enjoyed this one, and that's going to be it for the event in general. So thank you again to NoHEROES for letting me do this video for them. Again, if you guys want to check out my content, it's going to be linked in the description below for not only my YouTube channel, but also my website, which you guys are seeing here. So these lists should be up pretty soon, if not immediately as this video drops. So you guys should be able to see them fairly soon. And again, thanks again to NoHEROES. Enjoy the content. I'll catch you all next time.